Hi, Baconhair Animated here. Today, we are going to talk about how Guest 666 struck the house with traps and weapons to get revenge on his enemies. Before watching this episode, I advise you to check out the previous one, link in the description. The general was sitting in his office and didn't know what to do. Guest 666 started a terrible fire, and they were still treading water, even in spite of the measures taken and the state of emergency. As a result, he decided to continue the search for the criminal from the beginning and ordered him to bring him the detective who had conducted the guest's case before. The military immediately went to carry out his order. They took a detachment, weapons in case of resistance, and went to the detective's house.
Hello.
The general ordered to bring you to him. Get into the car. That's an order.
Oh.
The detective was waiting for them, although he was a little shocked by such a scale. He had something to say to the general. Besides, he was glad to return to the game. So, he quickly got into the car, and they drove to the headquarters. Hello, I'm glad to see you here. Thank you for coming. I had no choice, the detective said to himself. I'm happy to serve my country, General. How can I help you? First of all, let me offer you my deepest apologies for your suspension.
Whoa.
We can't but acknowledge the contribution that you've made during all the time that you've been engaged in the business of Guest 666.
Yes.
Now, we again need your knowledge and skills in catching the scoundrel. The detective was shocked. It felt like a rag that was just used when needed. But there was nothing to do. I had to agree.
Okay.
In the end, someone has to catch this freak. Great. We're relying on you. Find Guest 666 before he destroys the entire city. The first step was to collect evidence from the crime scene. Therefore, the detective immediately rushed to the burned down house. It was impossible to hesitate. He began to study the remains of the building and the half-burnt inscription left by Guest 666. Meanwhile, Guest 666 was back to work. The next victim he chose was the doctor who used to work at the station and injected Guest with that terrible mutating vaccine. After all, it's precisely because of the doctor that Guest 666 became a monster. With one kick of his foot, he knocked out the door and burst in. Unfortunately, all family members were in the living room drinking tea. Guest 666 pointed a gun at them and forced the father of the family to tie everyone up. Trembling and sobbing, the doctor followed his order and tied up all of his relatives. Why do you need to do this? You can kill me, but let them go.
Shut up. I'm here for another. Have you forgotten how you gave me that injection that turned me into a monster? You all knew that it wasn't yet fully explored. Now, I want to do the same with your son.
No way! Guest 666 pointed the gun at the doctor.
Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure. Only over my corpse.
Well, as you wish.
And Guest 666 immediately shot at the head of the family. And before all the other family members had time to move away from the shot, the offender took the syringe himself, went up to his son, and injected the contents of the syringe into him. Then, Guest 666 laughed and disappeared. The mother, who has escaped from the bonds, immediately called the police, and in tears told them everything. Doctors also came and examined the boy. Sadly, they told the mother that it was too late and the vaccine began to work. And it wouldn't be pumped back. The detective immediately rushed in and also began to collect evidence on fresh tracks. He was immediately struck by the numerous traces of dirt on the path to the front door and in the living room. There was also the smell of oil and fuel in the air. It was clear that the killer drove around in a car and isn't very clean, but the detective also had some other suggestions. However, in order to catch Guest 666 for sure, it was necessary to act decisively. Therefore, the detective went to the general with a report and an invented plan. The general, of course, greeted him with a gloomy face. What do you have, detective? He reported to him about the evidence from the crime scene.
Wow.
Not much.
And what should we do if he wants to kill again?
I have a plan. The detective said that to catch the criminal terrorizing the entire city was possible only by giving him the opportunity to get closer to his victims and ambush him.
What?
The general was at first indignant at such a dangerous operation, but quickly realized that they had no other choice.
Okay.
As a result, it was decided to bring all the participants of Guest 666's case to the house of the military man who created the Black Penguin Project. The house was securely protected by fencing wire, bars on the windows, and guards with the latest weapons.
Yes.
Moreover, there were surveillance cameras everywhere. But everyone understood that wasn't enough for Guest 666. So the detective reinforced the home's defenses with traps. He put up tripwires, put on shotgun traps, and heated up the door handles.
Nice.
Also, the detective thought it wasn't superfluous to spill glue and set nails. According to the detective's assumptions, the killer had only to get a taste. To provoke him even more, the detective asked to report on all TV channels the news that the army and police weren't coping with Guest 666, and they didn't even have a plan. So, the criminal had to overestimate himself, lose vigilance, and quickly move on to the next crime. Having finished with the preparations, the detective, with a calm soul, sat down behind the cells and began to wait. Hour after hour, he sat staring at the monitor, not even taking a break for food. Therefore, exhausted, he fell asleep, dead. At the same time, Guest 666 moved to action. He climbed over the fence and began to crack down on the guards. At first, it seemed that the killer was acting chaotically, but later, it became clear that his path led to the generator. Having reached it, Guest 666 cut off all the cameras. In the office where the detective was sitting, there was a loud hiss. It woke up the sleeping man. Realizing that all the cameras were cut off, he tried to contact the security, but there was no answer. Immediately, somewhere, there was the sound of a broken door, and then shouts and shouts. It was as if there was a whole firefight going on behind the wall. It suddenly became quiet. The detective realized that things were bad and ran into the room to the families. He tried to calm them down and find an emergency exit. At this time, Guest 666 quickly moved closer and closer to the coveted room, passing traps and firing back from the guards. Running after the survivors into another room, he burned his hand on a red-hot handle.
Ow!
Then stepped on the nails glued to the floor, and nearly fell on the scattered glass toys, tripping over the tripwires. Finally, Guest 666 got to his victims and began to threaten them with weapons.
I want to ask you something. Does this city even know the word honesty and justice? Other words have been learned here, such as venality and betrayal. I'm not interested in your social status and the number of money in your pocket. You tried to kill me, but I don't feel pain, and your bullets won't stop me. Thanks to this, I was able to understand who I really am. I'm true evil. I came for you to destroy each of you for what you did to me. Run if you have the strength, but it won't save you.
Panic began. The family members tried to escape, but Guest 666 aimed a weapon at them and, making sure that everyone stopped, continued.
Now you'll pay for everything, especially you, detective. I'll kill you first because you deceived me.
Guest 666 shot at the detective, but he dodged and rushed at Guest 666. A fierce fight began, but Guest 666 turned out to be more dexterous, knocked down the detective, and again aimed the gun at him. I admit you're strong, and I'm sorry that I deceived you, but let me make amends. There is someone stronger than you. Guest 666 glared at him.
And who is it?
His name shouldn't be pronounced loudly, otherwise he'll immediately come. Bend over, closer. Guest 666, eaten by curiosity, bent down, and the detective deftly handcuffed the villain. The detective clanged the second part of the handcuff to himself.
"This guest is me,"
the detective said, pulled out a grenade, and blew it up. The explosion touched both. The families, realizing what had happened, began to cry, but they suddenly noticed that the detective was still alive. One of them, a military man, approached him and said, "Thank you for saving us. I'm very sorry that I dragged you into this. And in general, I'm sorry the experiment resulted in this. I'll never do that again." Soon, an ambulance, police, and military arrived with the general himself.
"What a massacre,"
thought the general, examining the scene of the crime. Later, all the media reported that Guest 666 was defeated. The residents of the city finally breathed a sigh of relief. The detective was posthumously awarded the Roblox Hero Medal for saving the city, and he soon became a legend.